In 1986, 4 friends went on a camping trip to Mount Spokane. Their names were Allison, Dan, Kathy, and Nick. They'd grown up together since the first grade. They were each 26 years old and well versed in camping, having grown up surrounded by pine tree forests, coming from families who enjoyed outdoor sports. Even their parents had been friends, and with the exception of the 2 years that Dan had spent away on a mission for his church, the 4 had spent at least some time together nearly every day since they were 6 years old. To say that they were close would be an understatement. Allison was shy but funny. She had brown hair and brown eyes. She'd worn braces for nearly 4 years as a teen, the worst timing possible, and worked a decent living as an artist. Dan had dirty blonde hair, a ruddy complexion, blue eyes, was stout, and worked as a truck driver for his father's dairy. He was quiet and loved his hobby of hunting. Alone time, he said. Occasionally, he'd drive across country for his job, but mostly stuck to the Pacific Northwest region. His family sold the ice cream that was made at their dairy, and he'd often make the deliveries to upscale organic grocery stores. He said he considered it the perfect job for him. No one to bother him, no actual boss watching his every move. Kathy was tall and thin, gangly almost, her long legs and arms put to good use as she was the local high school's basketball coach and history teacher. And lastly, Nick was a ginger with a full face of freckles, a beard, sky blue eyes, average height, and a laugh that came from deep within. He'd become a priest, to the surprise of everyone, having been the wildest of the 4 growing up. He wasn't your stereotypical man of the cloth. He wasn't stitched up, as Kathy would say. He worked with teens, and for them to accept him, he knew that he couldn't be dressed like their father or grandfather. So he was a pretty casual guy, who dressed mostly in jeans and flannels, his ancient Chuck Taylors. Good luck, he said. It was late August, so the friends decided to go camping one last time. They had their usual camping spot, but Dan had suggested using a different one, telling them to think outside the box once in a while, and the other 3 protested, but they didn't really mind. They were actually a bit excited to go to a different campground. Also, there had been some articles in the newspaper about watching for unusual activity among campers. The article said to report anyone who didn't seem to fit in, maybe wasn't camping, or seemed to be becoming overly friendly with other campers, or even someone dressed in a uniform that would cause people to be trustful of them. The articles had also been particularly vague, so it hadn't raised too much alarm between the friends. Probably some sicko peeping Tom or something, Kathy had said. Yeah, or maybe someone stealing things, replied Dan. They decided that it was probably a good idea in the long run to keep an eye out, of course, but to not let this deter them from their last summer trip. The summer blowout, Nick called it. Yeah, you were really gonna blow it out, Nick. What, get crazy with a few beers? Allison teased her good friend. Yeah, he replied, poking her in the ribs. Maybe even smoke a cigar. Don't do it, Father, giggled Kathy, and they all laughed. Sheriff Deputy Derek Mann was a, quote, strange bird, according to his fellow officers. He was quiet, he never went out with the guys, and he didn't seem to have many, if any, friends. But he was an exemplary deputy who always did his job by the book, and nothing less. He was married, and he and his wife had 1 child, an 18-month-old baby boy named Samuel. His wife's name was Lynn, and she was equally quiet. But the 2 of them were very happy and enjoyed the simple things in life. They enjoyed staying in and cooking. Derek was an excellent cook. Lynn worked as a nurse, and after work she loved the fact that Derek wasn't the type of person who always had to be doing something. She loved his laid-back ways. The 2 had met when he'd brought a suspect with a head injury into the hospital she worked at. She never considered him an odd bird, She saw that he was shy and introverted. Sometimes he'd go for late-night drives by himself. He said it was to decompress, and it didn't bother her at all. Being a fellow introvert, she deeply understood the need to have alone time. On this night, Derek was pulling the graveyard shift. They'd eaten dinner and bathed Samuel, told him a bedtime story, and spent some time with Lynn, curled up into Derek while they watched Miami Vice. Then he showered, shaved, and put on his uniform. As he came down the stairs, Lynn was half asleep on the couch. Johnny Carson was on the TV, dimly lighting the dark living room. "Hey, I'm about to leave," he called in as he picked up his lunchbox from the top of the kitchen table. Lynn always made his meal and put a note in it somewhere for him to find. It was a sweet and kind gesture that he appreciated very much. Lynn, with her droopy eyes and wearing slippers that padded along, walked up to him and put her arms around his neck. "I need you to be careful," she said, looking into his eyes. "I'm always careful, my Lynn," and his voice trailed off. "I know, but it's different now." "It's fine, Lynn. I'll be fine," he said, kissing her on her forehead. The sheriff's office had a deal with the press to hold off on reporting the fact that it appeared that there was a serial killer stalking the campgrounds. The Park Service people were worried about the end of summer business, and the sheriff didn't want to cause unnecessary panic. There had been 5 known cases of missing people. At 2 campsites, there were signs of a struggle and or the victim's blood. The investigators were assuming serial killer because the blood found left behind at those 2 sites, well, there was just too much blood for the victim to have survived the attack. It appeared as though, in each case, the witnesses had seen someone in a uniform around the area. They'd spoken to several people: a doctor who had met his family at the campground in his scrubs, a Parks and Rec officer, a man delivering soda to the vending machines, a man who delivered dairy to the resort's kitchens, maintenance workers, a woman chef who worked at several resorts, but they still had no leads. "You know that if other people have been thrown off by this being a person in a uniform of some type, that it could fool you too, Derek," she said, her voice almost pleading. "Lynn, I know. I'll be safe. You have nothing to worry about, I promise." He kissed her sleepy face, patted her on her butt, and told her to go get some beauty sleep. "Ha!" she played. "You better think that this is what beauty looks like, mister. I have an 18-month-old baby who is sapping the life out of me." She laughed as she headed up the stairs. "And you're the most beautiful woman I've ever seen," he called out. At around 11 p.m., Allison, Dan, Kathy, and Nick were sitting around a fire. Father Nick was on his second whiskey, and he sure was smoking a cigar. "Look at Nick," joked Kathy. "I'm pretty sure he's drunk." They laughed. "I am not drunk," replied Nick. "That would be a disgrace. I'm feeling good and enjoying the outdoors that the good Lord blessed us with, and some fine tobacco, also been blessed with." The group was roaring with laughter, a bit drunk themselves, when they heard a twig snap. "Shh," said Kathy. "What was that?" "Probably an animal," said Dan. "We have a fire. They won't come close." "Well, that makes me feel better," said Kathy. "They're just out there waiting, watching for the fire to die down before they pounce." Rrr! And she made hands like claws and growled. They were laughing again, forgetting about the snap when it happened again. Closer. Snap. Snap. And a flashlight. Nick looked through his foggy eyes, squinting a bit. "Is that a cop?" he asked. "Shh!" snapped Allison. The sheriff's deputy walked out of the wooded area on a path. "Hey, no worries. Just checking to make sure y'all are safe. There's been some issues around this area, so we're touching base with Those of you that we can. Yeah, aren't we supposed to be suspicious of people in uniforms? Said Kathy. Stop it, snapped Dan. The officer was shining his light on their faces. Everything good here, then? He asked as his light landed on Dan's face. Yes, sir, replied Dan. Yep, we're good. Yep, fine, came from the group. Nick took a puff off of his cigar. Hey, make sure you throw that in the fire when you're done, okay? Said the deputy. I will, sir. He's a priest, started Allison. He follows all the rules. And they laughed. Okay, then. I'll leave you to be, said the deputy. But before he walked more than 8 feet, and just after he put his radio back into its holster, he turned around and said, Excuse me, sir, and pointed his flashlight at Dan. Can I have a word with you real quick? Sure, Dan replied as he stood up. Now, Dan, don't be fooled by the uniform, laughed Nick as he downed his 3rd drink. Thanks, bud, I appreciate that, laughed Dan, and he and the officer walked off into the trail. After an hour went by and Dan wasn't back, the group started calling out for him. Shit, what happened? Asked Allison. Nothing, said Kathy. He's trying to scare us. He went with a guy in a uniform and he didn't come back. Hello? He's messing with us. He was probably done 57 minutes ago and is pissed that it's been an hour before we even wondered where he is. They all laughed. Yeah, let's mess with him and act like we don't care, joked Nick. Hey, we're doing fine without you, Danny boy, called out Nick. Eventually the group went to bed. Just as the sun began to rise, the group heard loud noises. Branches breaking, radios, men and women's voices. Kathy crawled to the opening of her tent and looked out. Hey guys, something's wrong. Get up, she said hurriedly. The rest peeked their heads out as well as the officers came into view. Dan's tent wasn't zipped, and he wasn't looking out. Where's Dan? Yelled Allison over the noise. Get out! Get down on your stomachs! Hands out! They were ordered. Dan was never seen again, and only a massive amount of Derek's blood was found at the opening of the trail near the main road where his cruiser was parked. Too much blood for him to have survived the attack. The official report read that when Derek encountered the group, he recognized the face of one of the men as a vendor he'd interviewed, the man delivering the dairy, and he'd called in that he might be taking a suspect into custody. That was the last anyone heard from Sheriff Deputy Mann. Thank you for coming to my channel. If you're not already, and you would like to be, please subscribe to my channel. Also, if you would, please give this video a thumbs up. It helps me to know that you enjoyed my content. If you'd like to know when I upload new material or we go live with a podcast, please click that bell. And if you'd like to support my work, please consider becoming a patron. I'll leave the link below to my Patreon account. Thank you.